Good evening. Welcome back to the monastery. And I'm just back myself, as a matter of fact, because I had been in Toronto at the OCA Cathedral in Toronto to serve, and we had an inaugural meeting of the new Ontario chapter of the Orthodox Peace Fellowship, and I'm pretty well turning over being coordinator, the Canadian coordinator of the Peace Fellowship, to Justin Grimmond, who's a great deal younger and more energetic than I am. So I just wanted to answer a rather interesting piece of correspondence that I got. It has to do with transgendered people. And the correspondence is interesting. I won't reveal who sent it because it shows a startling lack of knowledge or understanding of the Orthodox faith, and also shows a shocking lack of understanding for realities of life, some of which are very painful and grievous to people, but some of our ignorant people desire to make life more painful and more grievous to people who are already suffering a great deal. Have to do with transgender. And here's the first question. Transgendered people should get operations to correct their gender? This is a question mark, not a statement. This seems strange to me, as it seems to imply that God may have mistakenly implanted a male soul into a female body and vice versa. How could God make such a grievous error? Well, in the first place, the idea that there are male or female souls is not Christian, it's Muslim. That's an Islamic teaching. Female souls are considered to be inferior to male souls. In fact, the only reason that females will even be resurrected or might find a place in paradise is so they can take care of the men, make their pilafi for them. The men won't need them because those who get into paradise will have their choice of virgins, a number of virgins. I don't remember the exact number, but let's say 7. They get 7 virgins each, and at least the martyrs do. That is, the ones who kill a bunch of people, who are called martyrs in Islam. And the virgins, they can rape the virgins, and then the virgins become virgin again overnight, or they can have 7 boys who they can rape, and then the boys will become virgins again overnight. One or the other. The Quran doesn't exactly specify that, but that's the teaching of Islam about paradise. But the idea that male and female have souls, that there are different genders of souls, male and female, this is Muslim. It's not Christian. And now, does it not go against the word of Christ when he states that in heaven there is neither male nor female, and therefore there's no marriage? Well, the writer has just contradicted themselves, because now they're saying, you see, in the heavenly kingdom there's no male and female. What does that mean? It means that the soul is neither male nor female. It doesn't matter what body it's in. See, we're not talking about the soul, we're talking about the brain. And if people don't know the difference between the brain and the soul, they're in real trouble. Or the Orthodox faith is in real trouble. And our teachers have sort of been out to lunch or something. But the soul does not have gender. And when we talk about transgender, we're talking about a difference between brain and body, not between soul and body. This idea that the soul has gender, that female souls are inferior to the souls of males. I realize the Mormons also have that idea, because a female can only be resurrected if her husband chooses to resurrect her, because female souls, of course, are inferior. But we won't say about the resurrection of the body. Of course, there'll be a transfigured body, which will have no gender. Now, as to whether it means that God made a grievous error, this indicates, or would suggest, or would actually teach, that God is responsible for every birth defect that occurs. That God is personally responsible for fibrous dysplasia, for Down syndrome, for retinoblastoma, for cystic fibrosis, that God created all these and he's responsible for them, you see. They're all things that people are born with. And if you insist that God would be responsible if a person was born transgendered, then you must also accept that God is personally responsible for having children born with cystic fibrosis. So if that's what you think, I would suggest that you're not a Christian and that you know nothing about God. Does this not go against the words of Christ when he states that in heaven there is neither male nor female? Well, that's what we're arguing. That's our whole point. There's neither male nor female in the heavenly kingdom. But we're talking about the brain. We're not talking about the soul. That's a big difference. The gender in a transgendered person, the gender of the brain is the actual gender. The body's an electromechanical system that serves the brain. So the brain can be completely female and the body can be completely male. And that's not even a mystery how it happens. It's not even a big deal to pursue how that comes about. There are XY chromosome, which means a male fetus, that are born with a complete 100% female body. And I've already discussed why that happens. Google it. I mean, do a little bit of research. Does this not contradict St. Justin, who says that people are genderless in heaven? Of course it doesn't. Of course people are genderless in heaven. We don't live in heaven. Didn't you notice when you got up this morning that we lived on earth? We're not in heaven yet. We're on earth. We have earthly bodies. We have earthly brains. When we get to heaven, things will be different. In the meantime, things are not different. We live in this world, on this earth, in these bodies, with these brains. Now, does this mean you agree with the Traducianist view of Tertullian of Carthage? Well, I believe St. Gregory of Nyssa also agrees with that view. Isn't that so? Wasn't St. Gregory a Traducianist? Here's the problem, you see, with throwing words around like Traducianism. Within the Orthodox Church, some of the actual fathers, Tertullian was not one, some of the actual fathers had disagreed on this point as well. And it's very, very grievous to try to resolve that issue because the majority of zygotes are spontaneously aborted. Doesn't matter whether you like the word or not, they're spontaneously aborted. They like to call it wastage because they think it sounds nicer, but they're spontaneously aborted. Now, if the soul is present the moment the male sperm penetrates the egg and fertilizes it, then the spontaneously aborted fetuses, which haven't really formed yet, in the resurrection, do they go through all eternity as zygotes, as fetuses, or do they get a special body afterward? There's almost a madness to this, trying to decide at what moment the body has a soul. It generally was thought that the minute the brain started to work, it had a soul, but there are different opinions among different fathers of the church because it's a ludicrous question to try to resolve. There are far too many very questionable results or ramifications from trying to take such a decision. If you believe that souls are passed from parents to their offspring, this would be the only way to reconcile your view with that of the apostles of Christ. Therefore, why do you believe a Traducian view when Tertullian writings, all of them are condemned as not holding apostolic doctrines by the bishops of Rome from Damascus to Galatius? Well, actually, the decisions of the bishops of Rome aren't terribly important to me, but Tertullian's writings were not all condemned, as a matter of fact. Some of his writings were condemned. Not all of them were condemned at all. Tertullian has a considerable witness to the thought of the ancient church. And Tertullian it didn't really go off in his earliest years. Some of what, I mean, was never considered a father of the church and wouldn't be. But remember, it wasn't until he became a ultra right-wing fanatic in the church that he became a heretic and began to teach heretical teachings. So all of his teachings were not condemned. Okay, Traducianism, some of the Holy Fathers in the East were Traducianists as well. Augustine of Hippo certainly must have believed that the soul was transmitted by the parents. Otherwise, he could never have conceived the heretical doctrine of original sin. See, unless the soul was transmitted by the parents, you could never suggest that the individual was born guilty of Adam's sin or inherited Adam's sin. How would he inherit it unless the soul was transmitted by the parents through the sex act? That's a conclusion one must reach from Augustine's teachings. Augustine, of course, is neither a saint nor a father of the church. If so, do you disagree with Gelasius simply because he was a supporter of Augustine? Well, I would certainly disagree with Gelasius because he was a supporter of Augustine of Hippo. Augustine of Hippo had to have been a Traducianist anyway, because otherwise his doctrine of original sin makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, it doesn't make any sense anyway, but it would be even more senseless if he didn't believe that the soul was transmitted through the sex act by the parents. See, Augustine taught that everyone personally, individually, inherited the guilt of Adam's sin. The Orthodox Church will say that we inherited a condition or a state of being, but not guilt. But for hereditary guilt, the soul would have had to have been transmitted through the sex act by the parents. That's a little... And then it says, why do you claim to hold the original apostolic doctrines of the church if you disagree with the chair of St. Peter? This chair of St. Peter business is an absolute fable that was concocted and created much later in church history. The Pope has never been infallible, ex cathedra or not. And you can sit on chairs all day long. You can have the chair of St. Peter, but you have to have the faith of St. Peter. The Orthodox Church, of course, has the faith of St. Peter. The Vatican has a chair, which St. Peter would never have seen and never have sat upon. The papacy is a total fraud. All of its claims were fabricated centuries after the ancient church. The donation of Constantine and all these other things are pure fictions and fabrications. And the infallibility of the Pope ex cathedra, well, the difficulty is that different popes have spoken ex cathedra and contradicted the infallible decision of other popes. See, when Alexander Borgia wasn't busy raping teenage boys and fathering children with various women, he sat upon the so-called Peter's chair also, and he was infallible. So don't talk to me about infallible popes. That's sheer, utter, unmitigated nonsense. In fact, it's actually blasphemous. So I gather, actually, that you're Roman Catholic, not Orthodox. Consequently, you might have an Islamic view of the soul, that the soul has gender. That's sheer Islamism. It's nothing whatsoever to do with Christians. Where in Genesis does it state that God made humans male and female, but souls male and female as well? Well, precisely the point. God didn't make souls male and female. The soul isn't male and female. The soul is without gender. The soul is a spiritual thing breathed into man by God. So where do you get the idea that the soul would be male and female? That's a Muslim teaching that you're trying to foist. It's not a Christian teaching. Does not your view on the resurrection contradict the very idea? Do you not believe, as the Jews did, that the body and soul are one united substance? The Orthodox Christian teaching, as a matter of fact, tells us the body and soul are one. Every single one of the Orthodox Christian fathers who wrote against Manichaeism and Gnosticism tell us that the soul and the body are one together. The body alone is not the person. The soul alone is not the person. Only when the body and the soul are united together do you have a person. Consequently, the resurrection is absolutely necessary in order for there to be a complete person. What the Roman Catholic teaching is not based on Scripture, is not based on the tradition of the Church. It's based on Plato's Phaedo, his sheer Neoplatonism, which of course was what Augustine was all about. He was a Neoplatonist, and all of his teachings are colored by either Manichaeism or Neoplatonism. That's why Augustine was the father of so many heresies. Does Genesis not say that God made male and female, and he saw that his creation was good, and not in need of being fixed? It was very good, as a matter of fact. So what you're saying then is that the fall of Adam and Eve never took place, eh? That's precisely what you're saying. There was never a fall. The fall never took place. So what you're actually trying to tell us, and God looked upon his creation and said it was very good, and every hideous, horrible genetic disease and cancer and all these other things then were created by God, and he said they were very good. But that is what you're saying, James. That's exactly what you're saying. So, but there was a fall, and mankind does need to be fixed. If it didn't need to be fixed, why would Jesus Christ have come down to earth and taken on our flesh and been incarnate? He came down to fix things. Us in particular. Are you saying that after the fall, well, okay, here you are. It doesn't need to be fixed, but now you're saying there was a fall. If there was a fall, things need to be fixed. Make up your mind. A genetic problem was transmitted in which souls could be male and female fleshly bodies. Does this not just amend the Augustinian view of original sin and take you into sillier directions? Nobody's talking about the soul. You've got to get your mind around the reality. We're not talking about the soul. We're talking about the brain. The brain is not the soul. Repeat after me. The brain is not the soul. We are not talking about a soul. We are talking about a brain. If a male soul is trapped in a female body, well, here you go again. See, this is just goofiness. I'm sorry, James, but this is just pure, sheer, unmitigated goofiness. You were talking about the soul. You have to get this Islamic idea out of your mind and try to come to a Christian belief, a Christian understanding, rather than an Islamic understanding. What you're presenting here is sheer Muslimism, sheer Islamism. It's not Christian. Does this mean that if a male with a female soul has sex with a female, that it commits an act of homosexuality? Well, of course, you're speaking from a Muslim point of view anyway, not a Christian point of view. But the actual fact is, if a transgendered person has a male body and a female brain, has sexual relations with another female, it's a lesbian relationship. Yes, absolutely. If a person who has a female body and a male brain has sexual relations with a female, that would be fine, because the person is male. If a person with a female brain and a male body had sexual relations with a female, it would be a lesbian relationship, because the brain is what your gender actually is, not the body. You don't think with your genitalia. Is homosexuality a sin that bars one from entering the heavenly kingdom, or do you also claim the above, the Apostle Paul, or is this just a mistake in translation? No, it's a mistake in your mentality. It's a mistake in your understanding, because you start with an Islamic premise, not a Christian premise. And then you go on to the sort of Gnostic idea that the soul is trapped in the body and has to be liberated from the body at death, which would make the resurrection silly. That isn't what's going on. Soul and body are linked together. But the brain can be a totally different gender than or there could be anything in between. Homosexuals are born homosexual. Nobody has a choice about it. It can't be changed. That's why the leader of the Exodus cult just resigned from it and apologized to all the people for whom he'd caused an absolute disaster and destroyed their lives. So the Exodus thing was one of these sectarian cults that claimed they could cure homosexuality. He finally realized that all he was doing was destroying people's lives. Okay? Now, that homosexuality is a sin? No. Okay, so what? It is. I mean, nobody's arguing that point. But what is the reality, though? And I don't care about your ideology. I care about hard science. People are born homosexual. They have no choice in the matter. None whatsoever. They can't change it. Period. But transgender is not homosexuality. Transgender people have the surgery because they don't want to have any kind of a homosexual relationship. You have a male brain, female body, you have sexual relations with a male because you have a female body. It's a homosexual relationship. Period. Stop. Because that's what your brain is male, and you're having sexual relations with another male, even though your body's female, it's still a homosexual relationship. So you need to learn just a little bit about what you're talking about, first of all. First of all, you need to convert from Islam to Christianity. And then you need to get the Gnosticism and Neoplatonism out of your system. And then you need to do a little bit of study in the difference in the brain and how the brain functions, how the brain's shaped, how it's formed, what things go awry in the womb, and even in the zygote stage. Things like Klinefelter syndrome, these are already in the zygote stage before the fetus is formed. The people with Klinefelter syndrome are 80% one gender, 20% the other. See? So perhaps you should put that in your Islamic hookah and smoke it. But you need to think these things through before you make these kind of statements and decide ultimately what religion you actually want to belong to.